Welcome to What? That Old Queen, a candid and adult take on queer life quandaries at a certain age. So please listen at your own discretion. Presented by Bernie and Tommy, their views are their own and in no way reflect those of any service you may hear this program on. Now, let your ears be upstanding for the Old Queen. Hello, Tommy.
Hello, Bernie.
How are you doing?
I'm not too bad, actually. Yeah, how are you?
I'm very well. We haven't done this in a while.
No, I fear I might be a bit rusty.
We might all be a bit rusty.
Well, it's nice to be back with you recording. I can't remember the last time we actually did this.
December.
Wow.
A lot has happened.
Yeah. Some good, some bad.
Some good, some bad. We've got a new Prime Minister. We've got a new King.
Long live.
So, long live the King. Hopefully we're not offending anyone by our title.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been quite a year, which is why we've had a bit of a break. What have you been up to recently?
Well, I was invited to Charleston House last weekend to perform the Diaries of Lytton Strachey, who was one of the Bloomsbury set. So kind of like Virginia Woolf, that kind of crew. Rich, upper classes, who spoke very RP. So I was quite surprised to be invited and speak his diaries. And it was someone that I didn't really know about at all. But after reading the diaries, I just fell in love with this fella.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why was that? What made you fall in love with him?
Well, the diaries are like he was a writer, novelist, but he was, a prolific diary writer, and he writes letters as well to different people, and you can see that his letters are just kind of distractions from actually getting on with the task in hand of writing the novels. And he would go to Charleston House to do his writing of the books. And I did pick out a couple of entries.
A little extract or two.
That I thought might be quite fun, because it's actually quite shocking, some of the things that he talks about. So he talks about friendships and picking up people, and also sadomasochistic relationships, where he's on a crucifix and different kinds of things like that.
Hang on a minute, did you say sadomasochistic?
Yeah. So have you got sound effects for a crucifixion?
No, but I can arrange that for the next episode. Well, lay it on us.
I want to die 100 years hence with a volume of Voltaire under my pillow and the ghost of erection still lingering between the sheets.
Oh, very profound.
A black-haired tart, mooching around the National Gallery, longing to be picked up. We both lingered in the strangest manner in front of various masterpieces, room to room. It goes on. Where am I going next?
I don't know. In the next room. I do quite like that imagery, because there's lots of almost like little love affairs that you have with people on public transport or in places like a museum or an art gallery, isn't there? Where you can just kind of size them up and fancy them a bit. And I quite like that.
Then, looking around, I perceived a more attractive tart. Bright yellow hair, pink face, plenty of vitality. So I transferred my attentions and moved in his direction. I looked closer at his face. It was the Prince of Wales.
Was it our current king?
Well, who's the Prince of Wales now? Is it William?
William, yeah. Slightly contentious. Yeah, Look, the less said about that, the better, really.
Well, let's just hope she lives up to it.
Yeah, let's do. Oh, but I love that. So he was a well-known queer writer.
He was a queer writer, but somehow along the line, his legacy hasn't lasted, whereas some of the Bloomsbury set have. But I was very curious to be there reading the diaries and the letters, particularly feeling, like I come from like a complete opposite of that kind of background, being quite working class. And as I was leaving, they showed us around Charleston House, and there was various curators and historians there. And I sort of said, I just wonder what Lytton would have thought of me reading his diaries. And one of these sort of, I would say, rather pompous historians said, "How long have you got?"
Oh, wow.
I said, "Not very long, because there's a taxi outside." And that was how it was left.
Oh, okay. He didn't sum it up in one word.
No, but I think Lytton would have done. He talks very much about class, and actually quite sympathetic towards class. But he was one of those queers that it was easier to be queer when you were, rich and wealthy.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
They sort of avoided any of the kind of issues that people from working class backgrounds sort of fall into, particularly in terms of law and order.
Yeah. They could buy themselves out of it, couldn't they?
Yeah. But also just being able to talk about those S&M relationships in a very considered and beautiful way in this National Trust house full of people that were a mix of, your kind of typical National Trust kind of audience, as well as like local queers from the area, was just very liberating and just a brilliant experience.
Amazing. Did any turn up in leather or rubber or?
Not that I was aware of.
Right.
No.
Okay.
No.
That's a shame. Did you turn up in leather or rubber?
No, I wore velvet.
Okay. Well, you've got that velvet fetish, haven't you?
Yeah. And I did it with Peter Baker, friend of the show.
Yeah.
And I took an extra velvet jacket for him. Bernie, of course, I wanted to do it with you.
Yes.
But you were otherwise engaged.
I was, which is a shame because I would have loved to have done it. But yeah, it was a friend's birthday weekend, so I kind of stayed here and partied, as it were. Talking of birthdays, it's our third birthday.
I can't believe it.
3 years.
I mean, one of those years we've pretty not much been doing very much apart from our own personal lives, which has been full and rich. And
yeah, but 2 of those years we were doing loads because it was lockdown, and we were doing
one every week.
And yeah, so I think it's evened itself out. 55 episodes.
It's not bad, is it?
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, I'm younger than that, so only just. But anyway, cheers.
Cheers. I've almost got an empty glass.
Oh, well, better fill it up. And talking about sexual relationships, we're back. For some reason, my auto-spell on the script has said we're back with a bag.
Oh.
But we're back with a bang because we're going to talk about the glamorous world of STIs.
I'm very excited.
Today. Yeah. We have a special guest, almost a specialist in STIs coming on later. Some might say that we were specialists with STIs ourselves.
Well, we've, had our fair share.
We've had our fair share. So I did a bit of research on the NHS website for sexual health for gay and bisexual men. And a survey of gay and bisexual men by Stonewall revealed that 1 in 3 men had never had an HIV test, and 1 in 4 had never been tested for any STI. I find that remarkable.
Yeah, I do as well, because I'm in and out of that health centre quite a lot.
Well, it's a home from home, isn't it?
I mean, I can actually it's so conveniently located for my flat that I can actually be in my flat. I can get there in 5 minutes and be in the waiting room.
Right. Well, perfect.
That's why I moved here.
Yeah. So, shall we go through some of these just quickly? We'll go in more depth when Nate comes on later. But some of them are monkeypox, obviously, which is very prevalent this year. Hepatitis A, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C.
Yeah, hepatitis.
Pretty much. I think my friend used to call it hepatitis X, Y, and Z. So, gonorrhea, which is a particular favourite of mine, which I've had a few times.
Well, this is a lot of this. The idea for this episode come from, well, us getting various forms. But I had gonorrhea in my throat, which I didn't have any side effects. Or would you call them side effects?
Symptoms?
Symptoms,
yeah. No, I don't think you do in the throat.
But I was treated for it and had to go through this sort of almost excruciatingly embarrassing but also quite fun and also reassuring process of telling people like that they might need to get checked.
Yeah, and how was that for you?
Well, I was absolutely humiliated at first that I thought that I couldn't do that. And then as soon as I sent one message, I was quite pleased by the reaction, which was, oh, thanks for letting me know, I will do that. And then I proceeded to tell basically everyone that had even just winked at me. Just in case.
So I also had chlamydia. Well, not also, but I had chlamydia, an STI, this year.
At a similar kind of time.
At a similar time, and also in my throat, bizarrely. I don't know how that happens, but I went through and told everyone who I'd slept with, and none of them had it.
Same here. Yeah. No, they all went, and this is what they said. You've got to believe them, I guess. Take their word for it. But they all said, "I've been, and I don't have it."
Yeah, I've been, and that's what they said to me. Yeah, I've been screened, and I don't have it. So somewhere down the line,
somebody's lying.
Someone's telling a porky pie. Okay, some other ones: non-specific urethritis, NSU. I think I've had that. Chlamydia I've mentioned. Shigella or Shigella. I've never had this. Sounds like a drag queen.
Never even heard of it.
Well, hopefully we'll talk about that later on. Genital herpes, syphilis, genital warts, which I think that's one of the first ones I got. We'll talk
I've never
about
had
later.
And do you have that similar thing with monkeypox?
I don't. In what way? Oh, that you can get a vaccine?
No, but you get warts when you have monkeypox.
Well, I think you get sores, don't you?
Okay.
So, I don't know. Nate can tell us later. Pubic lice, I've also had that. Otherwise known as crabs.
Yes, I've had crabs.
Scabies, I've had that. I pretty much had them all, really. There's also HIV as well, which I don't know. Have I mentioned that?
No.
I haven't had that one. And we get checked quite regularly because we're on PrEP. And we can maybe talk about that with Nate a little bit later. Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting, if not slightly squeamish episode.
I mean, interesting and squeamish are my two favourite words. It is like being on PrEP and having those regular tests and screenings have sort of kick-started other various forms of questions around my own health,
right?
That they've identified. So for example, they found blood in my urine, which meant that I ended up having a camera crew up my penis to look at my bladder. So it was something that they'd identified, and then they referred me to someone else.
Yeah.
Anemia was identified through that. I had to go through doctors. So in a way, it sort of opens up a doorway for you to take other elements of your health more seriously, or consider them in a way.
I guess it just makes you think more about health, doesn't it? So, yeah, because I also had a bit of a health scare with my nether regions, but that wasn't through my sexual health tests. That was through other things. but I was diagnosed with IBS. So I guess you just get to a certain point in your life and certain things start going wrong, don't they?
Well, we're discovering that. And the beauty is that we'll be doing it all together.
Yes, exactly. We can talk about it all in depth via this podcast. The other change, we've changed podcast hosts.
Yes.
So we now have ads.
What do you think they're going to be advertising?
I don't know. Well, I think so. Some of the previous episodes already have ads, and I think Homo sapiens is one of the popular ones.
Do you think that they'll be listening in to what we're talking about and choose appropriate adverts for us?
I hope so. Or is it like a general algorithm, just because we're a queer podcast?
I was on the train on Monday, and I looked out and I said to my travelling companion, look at all those ladders all lined up. Do you think that if you put them all together, you'd be able to reach the moon? And we both laughed. And then I looked at my Instagram and it started advertising ladders to me.
Big Brother is listening in right now. Do you think we're going to have lots of ads for ointments for our nether regions after this recording?
Well, I hope so, because I'm running low. Want to know where to go to get my next acquisition.
So anyway, if you don't like the ads, you can subscribe to Acast Plus, where you get, for a couple of quid a month, you can get all of our podcast episodes without the ads. Or you can do a plus subscription where we'll be posting some little extra bits that hopefully we can record while we're doing this season.
Did you like the Queen's funeral when they said, you know, in a mark of respect for the Queen, we're not going to be showing any adverts? They did it on Channel 4, but they just kept saying it,
right?
Rather than... Apparently on the BBC they just had a nice picture of the Queen, but on Channel 4 they just kept saying it.
Oh, okay. No, I watched BBC and it was Kirsty Young.
What, saying something?
No, she was just interviewing people where presumably everyone else is putting adverts.
Oh, okay. We'll just put Kirsty in.
Yeah, exactly.
Is she doing anything? Can we have her doing a little jingle?
I don't know. Shall I ask her? I'd forgotten about Kirsty Young. She used to do Channel 5 News, didn't she?
Kirsty Young, did she do Desert Island Discs?
Oh, yes, she might have done Desert Island Discs. But I hadn't seen her for years until then.
Well, she was very ill for a long time.
Oh, was she? Oh, okay.
Welcome back, Kirsty.
Welcome back, Kirsty. I was very delighted to see her. And welcome back, What That Old Queen. So we're gonna have a break now with proper ads. We'll be back afterwards with Nate. Okay, so we had ads, Tommy, for the first time.
And while they were playing, we had cake.
We had cake. We had little Colin the Cake from Marks and Spencer's, who refused to sponsor us. But I keep plugging him just in case.
Nice, wouldn't it?
How was the cake?
Delicious. Yeah, I always like Colin the Cake.
Yeah. We had a little candle as well. At that point, we also have our guest arrive, Nate.
Hi.
Hi, Nate.
Hi.
How are you doing? How would you describe what your title is in terms of your work?
So I'm a sexual health advisor, and I'm also a therapist as well. It's an interesting role that's kind of, I suppose, quite English in that sense, that is really one of the things that we have in sexual health services here. But basically I do a lot of psychological, emotional support and a lot of advice giving around sexual health.
Did those two roles come together at the same time, or has the job evolved into that?
Well, for me, no. So I have a background in, I did my undergraduate in biomedical sciences, so kind of virology and kind of epidemiology and that kind of stuff. So the science of infection. So that's where my knowledge base comes from. And then because the job is so kind of psychological focused, I trained as a counsellor while I was actually doing that job. And I'm now doing further training in psychotherapy and counselling psychology as well. So I'm kind of using the elements that I'm interested in, as well as the advice giving and kind of information stuff. So yeah, it's a mixture.
Great. And do you think will you branch out to just do therapy or?
Well, I currently practice as a private practice therapist already.
Oh, great.
But I'd like to probably incorporate more kind of sexual health into that as well. So, we'll see what happens with that as well. Okay,
so we mentioned some STIs, a lot of the ones that Tommy and I have had this week. And there was an interesting thing on the NHS website where it said a survey of gay and bisexual men by Stonewall revealed that 1 in 3 men had never had a HIV test and 1 in 4 had never been tested for an STI. I find that remarkable.
Yeah, I find that really strange. It's weird when I've been working in sexual health for over a decade now, and it's still really strange. Sometimes when I'll meet a patient who's maybe in their 30s or 40s or something like that, who's never tested before, and I'm just kind of like, oh, you've been sexually active for decades, literally, and you've never thought to have a test? Is it about the fear of HIV? Is it kind of some stigma? Is it? And then it's like, oh, I've been fine. I haven't had any symptoms, and now I've got symptoms. I've come in, and I'm like, okay, you should be doing this even if you don't have symptoms.
Yeah, because a lot of these don't actually have symptoms, do they? Yeah. Or some of them don't. I've got quite a few friends who are in relationships, and I guess they don't get screened because they're in a monogamous relationship.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, if there's no new risk for infection, then there's no reason why you need to test necessarily. However, obviously, some people still test in so-called monogamous relationships because things do occasionally happen, or they're concerned about their partner potentially kind of straying. But I think, if you're in a monogamous committed relationship and you would talk about it if it was kind of something that happened outside of that, outside of your primary relationship, then there's no need for you to test. But then there are those people that just assume that and haven't done that testing within it, and then potentially there's an infection there that hasn't been treated for many, many years. So, you've always got to do that test at some point.
I think that's probably more pronounced with men that have sex with men that are in relationships with women, that the woman might catch something that she's completely unknown and...
Yeah, so if he's kind of having sex outside of that relationship with other men, she's not a party of that information, and therefore potentially she's going to be at risk, and then something happens and she has some symptoms or something. And we've seen patients at work in that situation, and it's probably the worst way to find out that your partner's having other partners is to have an infection and find out. It's like they'll often come in and be like, oh, I've got these symptoms, but assuming that it's nothing to worry about. And then they're found to have chlamydia, and that can be completely devastating for someone's sense of their relationship and what that actually means to them. So, tricky.
Yeah, and I know a lot of straight women who are middle-aged, and they've had their menopause, and they've split up with their partners, and then they go on a sexual rampage. And because they've had their menopause, they don't use condoms or anything, and they think they're going to be fine, and actually they're exposing themselves to STIs, regardless, but they don't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, as part of I think there's definitely an increase in STIs in the younger population, so kind of under 25s, 16 to 25s, but there's also definitely evidence of more infections in those over 50, because especially if kind of relationship structures have changed, people are in their second marriage or kind of like, as you said, back out on the scene and things like that, and haven't used condoms for such a long time in their primary relationship that they're not thinking about that at all, or thinking that infections are going to be something that they're going to be at risk of. There's a few campaigns about chlamydia kind of for over 60s, like earlier, like a few years ago, because there was a big population that just had lots of chlamydia.
Wow.
And that makes me wonder about the pandemic, COVID. And I heard a rumour at the time that it was possible that like all sexual diseases would actually be erased because no one was getting any, or you were getting some, but within your own
your little networks.
Yeah, was that something actually transferred across? Or
I think, unfortunately, I mean, it was a monumental moment. Most moments are monumental, but it was a point in time that really we could have dealt with a lot of STIs a lot better. Like we had a time where basically people weren't having a lot of sex, and if we'd screened everybody that we could screen at that time, then we would have definitely had a massive reduction. Unfortunately, all of the funding for kind of sexual health services and stuff like that was already quite small, and we were in a pandemic, and it was kind of focusing on that side of the healthcare. But there were lots of campaigns about, okay, you're stuck at home, you might as well order a home testing kit and do something. makes more fun than playing Zoom with your friends, kind of doing some quiz night or something like that.
Or do both at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
We could all do that.
Make it into pub quiz.
It's an interesting round.
We
Who's
should
gonna
have done
kick us
that
off
with the
next?
podcast. We could have done live STI testing. So, and then done the results the next kind of episode. Anyway, I digress. So shall we go through some of these STIs and we
Yeah,
can
sure.
maybe expand upon them? Shall we touch on monkeypox for a bit?
Yeah,
because
sure.
that's been the headline of this year. Not technically an STI,
No.
but kind of is in
Yeah.
a way.
So obviously monkeypox is picked up through close, intimate contact. You need to have kind of contact with either someone who's got the kind of actual pox and ulcers or kind of like sores on their body, or potentially it can be picked up through droplets that are passed through kind of kissing and stuff like that. So you need to be, you can't just, it's not like COVID, it's not really super easily acquired just in a room with someone else. You need to have close kind of intimate contact with it.
Could be on a towel, though.
Yeah, so it can be on kind of fabrics and kind of bedding and things like that as well. So you can pick it up from that, and then if you touch your skin through that way. But the reason I think it's ended up appearing like a sexually transmitted infection is because it's within groups. It's within kind of gay and bisexual men predominantly across the world, and that's why this outbreak has happened, is because these people are having close contact, and then having close contact with other people, and then that's how kind of the infections kind of spread through those groups.
Can it be treated?
Yes, yeah. So it's a self-limiting infection. Everyone kind of recovers from it. I mean, historically there have been some deaths with it, but I don't really think with this kind of outbreak there has been at all. So you will overcome the virus, you get over it. There is medication that can help you do that, and obviously there's the vaccine that's available to kind of stop you getting it as well.
Okay.
Why is it connected to a monkey?
Good question. I think I don't know. I think actually it was something to do with the fact that basically there have been some animal cases of it, and I think basically there was something there. But I think it wasn't monkeys that were the source or anything like that. It's not directly picked up from monkeys.
Well, I feel sorry for the monkeys.
I know,
Yeah.
it feels a bit
Blaming them.
label on.
Yeah.
But it's a bit like chicken pox, I suppose, as well, isn't it? Because that's blamed on chickens, which I'm sure it's not anything to do with.
I don't think.
Panda pox. I'm looking forward to that one. So some of these have vaccines. Hepatitis A, B, C, W, X, Y, Z.
Yeah, so some of the hepatides do have vaccinations. So basically there are three types of hepatitis you want to be aware of, really, in terms of kind of you might be at risk of. So hepatitis A is an infection that's picked up through tiny bits of fecal matter, so tiny bits of poo that you might ingest. So obviously things like rimming could be a potential risk. That's, again, self-limiting, so you always clear that virus.
While swimming?
Yeah, you can pick it up through wild swimming. There is some cases of people picking it up through food and water, which is a typical route in places that don't have so good hygiene as well. But you can vaccinate against that. But you always clear that, so you always get better. But you can feel really rubbish while your body's trying to overcome it.
I'm kind of regretting that was a chocolate cake now after that description. Anyway, hepatitis B.
Yep, so Hep B, that's another vaccine you can get. So Hep B, unlike Hep A, some people don't clear, some people can't get rid of. So the vast majority of people living with hepatitis B will overcome it. Their immune system kind of deals with it, gets rid of it, sorted. You're left with the natural immunity, so basically your body fights it off. You're left with antibodies. A very small percentage of people can't do that for whatever reason, and they live with it chronically, and it affects the liver over time. So it's important to get that vaccine. That can be passed through sex or through blood-to-blood contact.
Okay, and Hep C?
No, so Hep C, there isn't a vaccine. Unfortunately,
Okay.
Hep C is another infection that you can pick up, and that's generally through direct blood-to-blood contact, but there isn't a vaccine for that one, unfortunately.
But you can be treated for that now.
So so about 1 in 5, 1 in 6 people will clear Hep C naturally, but the other 4 out of 5, or 5 out of 6 people can have treatment. It's a lot better than it used to be as well. So historically, it used to be really terrible treatment that potentially would cause you long-term problems with your mental health. But now it's actually oral treatment that's very good and very easily taken.
Gonorrhea.
Okay. Super gonorrhea.
Oh gosh,
yeah.
there's a super version now as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there is. So gonorrhea is a bacterial infection, very easily picked up through any kind of sexual contact. So you can obviously get it in your genitals, you can get it in your bum, you can get it in your throat. Sometimes causes symptoms. Generally, the strains that we're seeing nowadays don't cause as many symptoms as they used to. So historically, people would be talking about pissing razor blades and all that kind of stuff. Often you won't get symptoms even in the genitals, but you probably wouldn't in the throat or the bum. But that's completely curable because it's a bacteria. But it's a clever bacteria, so it can develop resistance against the antibiotics we use, which is what super gonorrhea is. It's not really super, it's just a bit more resistant to certain antibiotics that we typically use. And it's quite rare, luckily.
So should people be getting tested more? I mean, they should be getting tested anyway,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, should be getting tested regularly. So the recommendations, so the organisations like the British Association of Sexual Health and HIV, so BASH, their recommendation would be for gay, queer, bisexual men to test every 3 months if they've had a change of sexual partner.
NSU?
So NSU stands for non-specific urethritis. Technically not an STI. It's a condition. So NSU is basically an irritation of the urethra, but we don't know what it is, so it's non-specific, and that's what the acronym stands for. Can be caused by gonorrhea, can be caused by chlamydia, can also be caused by lots of other things. So until we know what it is, it's non-specific. But the other things that it can be random stuff. So there's lots of different bacteria, potentially viruses, potentially just the body's response to irritants, so sometimes shower gel. So
okay.
Don't use links or stuff like that. Again, sorry if I've any sponsorship deals there.
I don't think we were looking for that one.
Okay, that's right. Probably
it's not really our demographic.
Don't judge.
I'm not judging. So chlamydia, have we already talked about that? Okay.
Chlamydia is very common.
Chlamydia is Bernie's favourite.
It's not.
It's a pretty sounding one, and there are some. I think there have been some people that have wanted to name their children chlamydia, and then when they've gone to kind of register the name of the child, they've been like, "You sure about that?" Maybe not. But again, another common one that we see a lot in younger people. So again, that, as I said, that 16 to 25 demographic.
It was the first sexual disease that I ever had.
Was it?
It's got a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Has it? Well, can we talk about that in a bit? Shigella.
So Shigella is essentially a gut parasite. So it's it can again be picked up through rimming, or potentially kind of, if you were to give someone a blowjob and they've been fucking someone and it's kind of, there's bits there, potentially that's how you pick it up, and that can make you feel really, really unwell. So it's not a good one. Basically, you'll get lots of gastrointestinal problems you'll feel.
When I thought it was Shigella, I thought it sounded like a drag queen name, but Shigella sounds like a psychic drag queen.
Yeah, psychic. But again, completely curable. So these are all infections.
What, being a psychic drag queen?
Yeah, that's...
Okay, great. Okay, genital herpes.
Yeah, so herpes, there's two types of herpes really. So there's the cold sore virus, so herpes type 1, and then the more typical genital version, so herpes type 2. You're more likely to get type 2 in the genital area, although you can get type 1. It gets a little bit confusing, but realistically it's a normal skin virus. So a lot of people have herpes. Probably about 1 in 10 people in the UK will have type 2 herpes, and probably about 70-80% of the population will have type 1, so the cold sore version. They're normal skin viruses, but we've made them out to be the worst possible thing in the world because they're incurable. But as a human, you're filled with loads of viruses. These are just ones that some people have that cause ulceration.
I haven't had a cold sore for probably about 5 years.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
But do you think that means...
You still have the virus.
Yeah.
So I haven't had a cold sore since I was a kid, but I still have the virus. And it's basically, it lives in your nerve tissue. So it lives in your nerve cells and it just goes dormant. Doesn't really do anything. And then sometimes it can activate. So if you get really run down, if you get really stressed, that's when your immune system dips and the virus can reactivate again.
And syphilis, which apparently is on the rise again.
Yeah. So we're seeing a lot more of gonorrhea and a lot more of syphilis. Syphilis is, again, a bacterial infection. It's probably one of the oldest infections in terms of kind of STIs. It's been around forever. If you look at kind of some of the history of it, it's quite interesting. But it's very easily treated with penicillin, so we're still using penicillin for it. So it's great, it works really well, but it's a bit harder to detect properly. So with things like chlamydia and gonorrhea, you can take a swab, there it is. Same with herpes, you can kind of pick up on the virus and basically show it. With syphilis, you basically have to do a blood test, so you need to show your body's response to syphilis, really. So the antibodies or the presence of the syphilis in your blood, which is a little bit more complicated, and it can take up to 3 months for that to show. You can show symptoms of it, so you might get an ulcer when you first get it, and then you might get a rash a few months later on your chest, potentially your hands and feet. But the blood test is the best way to test for it.
Genital warts. I always wanted to call my child that. Not chlamydia, which was the first STI I ever had. Mm-hmm. I remember so we can talk about the first time now you ever had an STI. I was so mortified when I had to go to the gum clinic here in Bristol, actually. Okay. I have to say that the female doctor that I had was so good. Yeah. She was so sensitive, and she realised I was so embarrassed about this. She made me feel so at ease. It was unbelievable. But yeah, let's expand on the genital warts, shall we?
So genital warts are basically, it's a HPV, so the human papillomavirus. There are lots of different types of HPV. Some cause genital warts. So there's a few different strains which cause genital warts. Some can cause penile and throat cancers, some cause cervical cancer, some do absolutely nothing at all, but they're very, very common. So if you were to take a skin scraping of pretty much anybody, you'd probably find some versions of HPV. Genital warts are where basically the virus kind of causes the skin cells to divide in a really funny way, and it makes this little cauliflower shape, basically. It's very normal to have HPV, but most people that have genital warts, or the versions that cause genital warts, probably will never show them. So again, it's a really common virus to have, but most people don't know they have it.
There is a vaccine for this.
So HPV, there is a vaccine for that. There's something you can get at sexual health clinics, typically in the UK, for gay and bisexual men. That's a course of 3 injections, and protects you against, as I said, some of the types that cause genital warts, but some of those really uncommon types but are more serious, so the ones that can cause penile and throat cancers. So definitely another good vaccine to get, because it protects you against things that you're very unlikely to have, but you don't want to get genital cancer. It's not a fun one to have.
No, I can't really have the vaccine because I'm too old, aren't I?
Yeah, this is an interesting point that I was actually talking about with a colleague today. So there's a kind of upper age limit of 45, and the rationale behind this is because by the time you're 45, deemed to potentially have been exposed to these types already, and there's evidence that basically points to it doesn't necessarily give you any benefit to have it after that point. Right. However, we were talking about the fact is if you were to come out later in life, or potentially to be, not particularly sexually active for a big proportion of your life, and then, kind of divorce your husband and basically go back on the scene, actually you would be at risk. So it's an interesting point about why we decided, or not, I didn't personally decide, it wasn't up to me, it was up to some very clever kind of epidemiologists, but there is unfortunately typically kind of an age limit to it, which is interesting.
Have you had it, Tommy?
No.
Okay, you're too old now as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, okay, well, we'll just have to live with that one. I'm going to put these two together, which are kind of lesser ones. Okay. Pubic lice and scabies, because they're kind of treated in the same way, aren't they?
Yeah, so the similar treatment. The amount of pubic hair that people have, we see a lot less pubic lice than we used to.
Because the bush is getting smaller?
Yeah.
Well, people are scaping a bit more, aren't they?
Yes, there's definitely more
not here.
No, not me. Not me. But I think because everybody watches porn and they've all scaped everything off, that they think that's a natural thing to do, don't they?
Yeah. But it's definitely reduced the amount of surface area that the pubic lice can live in, so therefore they're on the wane.
Habitat, should we call it habitat?
There we go. That sounds the right word. And then scabies is a tiny little mite that lives under the surface of the skin. It can both be really itchy because basically the pubic lice it's to do with their eggs and things like that, and it irritates the skin. But the scabies is kind of just under the skin and kind of causes these little furrows to basically not furrows, burrows, to kind of cause irritation at the level of the skin. And that can be really difficult to treat because you need to wash all your bedding, you need to kind of actually cover yourself with the medication all over your skin and then do it again. So, yeah, you often get people kind of having to be retreated for that one because they're not quite getting rid of it. But you can pick it up from sharing a bed with someone you don't know. Like non-sexual way as well, or kind of
or in a hotel.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think most places nowadays it'd be quite unlikely, but possible.
Well, you should see some of the places that I have to stay when I'm touring.
Wow, yeah.
But it's basically it's the same topical treatment, isn't it? For head lice. Basically,
yeah,
isn't
basically
it?
it's the same stuff.
So it's quite easily and readily available over the counter.
Yeah, so you could go into the normal pharmacy and get kind of Lyclear or I forgot the name of the actual other one. And basically permethrin, and that's it, and cover your skin with that. But you'd have to do it on all the areas that you're potentially going to be at risk of having it.
Well, I think we kind of covered most things there.
I think we've covered,
and we've got an extended Queens of Agony section, which I'm hoping you're going to join in, where there's a couple of these things might come up.
Yeah, sure.
So
I'm keen to ask though about your own hair on your head.
Okay.
What's your regime? Do you have those beautiful
to keep my long curly locks? Well, I have a specific kind of hair product that I basically put in when my hair's wet, and then I go to sleep with my hair wet, and it basically just magically curls my hair.
And what would you want to tell us what it is?
I can't remember the name, which is why I'm stalling for time.
Okay.
I can't remember.
It'll come back.
Is your hair curly if you didn't do that? Then?
Yeah, so it's naturally curly, but in order to kind of get the curls to kind of pop, as it were, basically that's how I did it.
And are you sort of gingery and you've blonded the?
No, weirdly my beard's quite ginger, but I'm actually kind of just a mousy browny blonde. Oh, okay. So yeah, there's definitely some reddish tones in my hair, but I'm not. My brother's very strawberry blonde. And I'm not.
You do look a little bit Viking.
Yeah, I know, that's the kind of look I'm going for now.
Yeah.
And a bit surfery.
Yeah, a mixture of kind of like snowboarder, Viking, kind of surfer. That's the...
And you've got quite a following on Instagram, haven't you?
Yeah, it's probably because there's some pictures of me in my pants.
That always draws them in.
Exactly. That's what you need with Instagram, really.
Those thirst pictures. Exactly. Anyway, okay, shall we do some Queens of Agony?
Yeah, great.
So I do a big gong at this point. Right, Queens of Agony. So, dear old Queens, and Nate, obviously, I got my MPX vaccine 24 days ago. That's monkeypox. Mm-hmm. 24 days ago. I still have a mark on my arm in the spot where they administered it. It looks like a minor bruise, kind of pink/purplish, and there is an ever so slight bump there as well. Does anyone else experience this? I'm just wondering if it's normal. I asked my doctor and he just said most people's induration goes away after 3 weeks, which wasn't very helpful. So, marks on the arm. Now, most of the people that I know that have had a little mark or a lump.
Yeah, it's a weird vaccine because usually these things kind of go into a big muscle group. But with the monkeypox vaccine, it goes in a really odd place. So it's subcut. So it can leave a lump because basically it causes inflammation at that site. And there are lots of people that are like, oh, I've still got a lump, it's still there. Or it's still a little bit sore and kind of if I press it. And then I'm like, well, just don't press it. But no. But in all seriousness, it will probably resolve for that guy. I think it's probably nothing to worry about. It's just one of those things that your body's just taking a bit of time to heal in response to it.
I didn't get anything.
You're lucky. Some people do, some people don't.
And I'm wondering if it's because I'm so old. They actually tested smallpox on me when I was younger. No, I think I might have had the smallpox vaccine when I was very young. So I don't know whether that was...
There was some questions about that actually when the monkeypox outbreak started about if you'd had the smallpox vaccine as a child or if you were in the army or something like that and you'd had it, whether you would need to have it again. And actually the evidence said that basically if you hadn't had it within the last 5 years, then you would need to have another one because you actually lose so it wouldn't be that. It's just you were lucky.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Tell me, did you have a lump or a bump?
I haven't had it.
Oh, you haven't had it?
Yeah, I haven't had the vaccine.
Well, you can report on that later on.
I don't have an opinion on this question.
Okay.
Naturally, my default answer would be it would probably be fine.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so Dear Old Queen's Nate, getting an HPV vaccine. I'm a late bloomer, started dating in my 30s, late last year, before really getting into the dating scene. I asked my doctor about HPV vaccine and he dismissed any of my concerns and did not recommend it. He's one of those random automatically assigned doctors I got. Clearly doesn't really deal with many gay patients. I kind of went on with my life without getting the vaccine. Just had mono for the past few weeks. I don't know what that means. For the past few weeks, and it's been pretty terrible. And it made me think of precautions I should consider. I've only made out with a handful of people and had sexual encounters with 2 people. I think at this point it might be too late to get the HPV vaccine since it's so prevalent, but was wondering if it makes sense to still get it.
So I think mono in America is mononucleosis, which is glandular fever. I think that's what we call it over here. I'd say still get it. It's obviously the healthcare systems are very different. It sounds like they're in America because they're assigned a general physician, whereas obviously we have sexual health services here. That's a specific branch of healthcare that you would go to. But yeah, you should push for that.
But presumably, though, if you were living in a rural location, you wouldn't be going to a sexual health centre. You would just see your doctor.
Well, basically, in the UK, funding for HPV vaccines for men who have sex with men is only in sexual health services. So it's all to do with basically the situation that happened when we started vaccinating young girls for HPV, for cervical cancer. They were like, we'll just vaccinate young girls because the young boys will just get what's called herd immunity because they'll be having sex with the girls. And then it was like, wait a second, some boys have sex with boys. Didn't think about that. So a lot of the HPV vaccination in sexual health services is to kind of catch up people who weren't given the vaccine when they were young at school before they were sexually active, but also those guys who are a bit older. But yeah, if you're in a smaller community or kind of like something like that, you might not be accessing sexual health in a big clinic. You might not be able to get it through your GP. It might be a bit trickier.
I was saying earlier on that, I can be in the clinic in about 3 minutes, which is the benefit of living here.
Yeah, because you don't live in a rural area. Yeah. I mean, it's a bit longer for me, but it's also quite quick.
It's like much closer than mine. It would just be much easier commute for me on those days I go to work. That would be quite nice.
Yeah, exactly.
But then if I was late, it would probably be a bad thing.
Yeah. Okay, these are all about vaccines. So, dear old Queens and Nate, is it still okay to get my second monkeypox vaccine? Again, I think this might be an American listener because we're not doing second shot here yet, are we? So is it okay to get my second monkeypox vaccine shot 4 days after I got a tetanus shot? Or am I supposed to wait longer in between different shots? It's been over a month since my first monkeypox vaccine shot, and I'm scheduled for the second one on Friday, but at a physical on Monday, I got a tetanus shot. Is that okay?
Probably, yes. I'm not a prescriber or a nurse or a doctor, so take any medical advice I give with a pinch of salt. But realistically, I would say, yeah, that's completely fine because they'll be acting on different pathways in terms of your immune response. So the first and second vaccines are minimum of 28 days apart. The good thing about the monkeypox vaccine, the first one, is actually you develop a very good response very quickly. So you've probably got, within a few weeks of having it, probably about a 95-96% coverage, which is really good. The second one obviously just boosts that and solidifies that and kind of keeps it going. But in regards to another vaccine, the tetanus, it should probably be fine because you can have multiple vaccines at the same time. So when we give HPV, hepatitis B and hepatitis A for a new person in clinic, we give them 3 vaccines on the same day.
Okay, well that's good. That's kind of the end of the STI bit. I mean, what would you say to people? I mean, people just basically need to go and get tested, don't they?
Yeah, our recommendation is, get tested. It's a lot easier to get tested than maybe it was historically because you can do it at home. A lot of places, obviously in Bristol, we have postal kits that you can access through the website and basically get sent a kit at home, do your swabs and urine for chlamydia and gonorrhea, do your blood testing at home and then send it back for HIV and syphilis.
Don't give too much poo or fill up the urine thing too much either.
Definitely shouldn't be sending in a poo sample.
Tommy, that's where you went wrong.
Yeah, just
That's what they asked for.
no, it's just a swab from the bum, swab from the throat, and a pee sample.
Did you send them a dirty protest?
I spelt my name in it.
on the box?
Just signed it with fetal matter. Okay, so we've been off air for quite a long time. This is our first podcast back in 9 months. So we've got a couple of we've got a few more questions here because they've been stacking up since we've been off air.
Those poor people.
I know. What are they going to do without our advice? So now we get to the juicy stuff, Nate. So you don't have to talk about work anymore.
Right. Okay.
Well, but obviously you can if you feel you need to. So dear old Queen's Nate, a threesome with a straight couple. So I've been asked to be in a threesome with a straight couple. To start off with, I'm gay, so I have no interest in women. I'm really good friends with a girl from the couple, and she confessed to me that when she met me, she was into me. Also, I was really obsessed with her boyfriend, who is bi, and she told me he's kind of into me too. To get to the point, my question is, how exactly is it going to work? Since I don't know how comfortable I am with doing stuff with the girl, besides the obvious of him fucking her and I'm fucking him. I've wanted to bottom for this guy for so long, but don't see any arrangement to make that happen. Any suggestions?
I could think of a few.
Well, Nate, do you want to start the ball rolling with
Well,
this?
I mean, like it depends what he like. So if you've got a straight couple, it depends. He might want to bottom for her. Like, why not let her peg him? There you go.
This is true. Yeah, they haven't even brought that up, have they?
We've got to throw things into the mix.
Could have brought along a tool.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Tommy, you've been in this situation, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm often asked to do that, but I've never accepted the invitation.
Right.
Yeah, just because I just feel weird about it, really. But, I mean, I'm not ruling it out. Would never rule it out, but I haven't ever accepted it.
No. I don't think I've never been asked to do this.
There was a situation where, it was in this flat, and it was all about to happen, but then the woman got very jealous and kicked and left the room.
She was jealous of you.
No, because there was another person as well, so it's actually 4 of us.
Okay.
I was just reading Vanity Fair magazine.
Okay. Watching Take the High Road with the sound down. Which invariably happens in kind of threesomes. But
there's always one, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's usually 3, but, I don't know. I've never been asked to do this, but I think if I really fancied the guy, I might be open to it. But as to how you would negotiate that, I mean, I guess you can. It depends how it all pans out and what you feel like doing at the time, right?
Yeah, I think there's something about, you can enjoy kissing someone but not necessarily find it really, really horny or kind of really into the sexual kind of element of it. So the touching might be quite nice. There's a sensualness of touching someone's body even if you're not sexually attracted to them, perhaps. But I think it's more about him obviously wanting to have sex with him and she'd maybe get in the way.
Well, yeah, again.
But he might surprise himself.
Yeah, he might surprise himself. I mean, I would do some research.
I would just get really drunk.
Okay, but then that also has...
Well, possibly not too drunk.
But that may not work. I mean, maybe have a bit of Dutch courage. But I fear that there's probably a lot of videos you can watch via Pornhub or something about this.
Whilst doing it at the same time.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That maybe help.
Because there's a lot of bi porn out there, so... why don't have a look? See what you fancy.
You mentioned Pornhub. Did you like the fact that they were referring to the BBC as Mornhub?
Wasn't there something about a gay sauna that was going to show the funeral?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, there was. I saw that tweet.
They were going to be open, but they were. In respect of Her Majesty, they were going to show the funeral.
They weren't going to show any porn.
They were going to show Mornhub instead of Pornhub. So there you go. All right. So this next one is for you, Nate.
Okay.
I feel. DL Queen's Nate. Should I switch to a different therapist if he's too hot?
Is this about me?
Don't know. I couldn't possibly say. So, like, he's so gorgeous, but obviously he's my therapist and not going to be my boyfriend or anything. I'm not dumb enough to actually tell him I have a crush on him, but it's like it'll be in the back of my mind all the time. What do I do? I actually like talking to him, but I don't know if it's because he's hot or if it's because he's a good therapist.
So my instant response to this is around, getting into therapy terms, but it's around a thing called erotic transference. You'll often fall in love with your therapist. You'll often find your therapist really, really attractive because they're providing something for you that's something that you need. So it can be around kind of something that that being able to be heard or kind of having a place that you feel safe to talk about the things that you want to talk about. They could also just be really hot, but there's probably a reason you've chosen that therapist in the first place, which is also okay. It's okay to kind of find that. Your therapist probably knows. Like, that will be the other thing that I think...
Do you think?
Yeah, I think if you bring it up, it won't probably be too much of a shock to your therapist because they can see that we're tuned into kind of what's going on. The way that you might smile, the way that you might interact is probably something that they may have thought of.
Do you think my therapist knows that I want to wear her pashmina?
Yeah, because you keep stealing it. Can I wear this during the session?
I mean, would you advise someone not to have a therapist that they might fancy?
It's a tricky one. I think if it feels like it's too much, if it feels like you're not disclosing the things that you want to disclose, or you feel like there's something getting in the way of that, I think that's something to bring to your therapist. I generally think being honest about what's happening in the therapy room is really important. There's a relational dynamic that's happening that may be about something that's happening outside in the real world. So it might not be quite what's going on, but also, name it and see what happens. Rupture and repair is a massive part of therapy, and if it happens in the therapy room as opposed to outside the therapy room, that can also be really helpful.
There you go. Have you mentioned the pashmina to your therapist?
I was sort of like, I don't have a therapist anymore, but I did have a therapist, and I always liked her pashminas, yeah.
Okay.
I never fessed up.
Does she listen to this podcast?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't even remember her name now.
If you've still got the pashmina, can you send it in?
Next time.
Okay.
Do you wear a pashmina when you do your therapy sessions?
Not often. If it's a bit cold, perhaps. No, I don't.
Okay, so dear old Queens, and Nate, obviously, when you first had sex with a man, what most surprised you?
I think I was quite surprised with the hairy bottom.
Okay. I think I kind of expected that.
Yeah, I'd expected that as well. I think, are we talking about first penetration, or are we talking about first?
I guess, yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It says when you first had sex with a man. I mean, I really liked it.
Yeah.
Which wasn't so surprising, but I really, really did like it.
It was like, wow, this is kind of really pretty amazing.
Yeah, this is kind of what I've been wanting for a long time.
Yeah, this kind of ticks the right boxes.
I think the other thing that surprised me, because I had snogged girls before, but how it's different snogging a man. It's kind of, I can't describe it. Like it's like tough and hard.
Different
and
face.
And there's just something rough about it, which I really liked.
Yeah. I think back to kind of like kissing girls and being like, this all feels very soft and a bit gentle and a bit kind of like, this isn't quite what I want. And then kissing a boy and being like, this is definitely like there's a rawness there, that there's something kind of, I don't know if it's, obviously it can still be lovely and gentle and tender with a guy, but it's like, I don't know, there's something about,
and it can be rough with the girl.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something about the taste of someone's lips that may be different. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that's what I noticed. It was different kissing a guy.
But was it your intent behind the kissing? Do you think that was different? That was why it felt more as well.
Maybe. Who knows? Interesting. Okay, we'll move away from the sexual side. Well, kind of, but maybe not. Okay, dear old Queens and Nate, which show do you prefer, The Golden Girls or Sex in the City, or / and Just Like That? Sex in the City had more guys taking their clothes off, but aside from Samantha, I never really found the characters lovable or funny. The Golden Girls was funny from the beginning to end. When I was younger, I did find Rose annoying, but now I'm grown, I love her just as much as Dorothy, Blanche and Sophia. Okay.
I mean, there's so much to unpick.
I know, right? I mean, I always loved Rose. And Just Like That, wasn't the statistics is that all of those actors are the same age as the Golden Girls?
Yeah. I love that fact. Yeah.
I kind of love them both.
Yeah, I
for different reasons.
Struggle with Sex in the City, but I absolutely devoured And Just Like That. And I never liked Carrie as a character until And Just Like That. Because she just sort of grew into grief, I suppose, and she just became a nicer person as she got older. That character, for me anyway, I felt very empathetic towards her. And I've watched it twice now, that whole series.
Yeah.
And there was one that she's just walking around the city, and I felt really lonely and sad one day, and I just did the same thing because I thought, oh, Carrie did that, and it was quite good for her. So I just walked around.
Nate, do you have any opinions on this?
No.
Have you got a favourite character?
What, from Sex and the City or?
Well, either.
I don't know. To be honest, I'm not much of a fan of either.
Okay.
I'm just probably going to alienate myself from your audience.
Not at all.
Okay, that's fine. I don't know. Sex and the City always felt like a bit like, oh, that's not really what real life is, and then it just felt a bit like, well, you're just obviously the over-sexualized one, and you're the over. It just felt really. Yeah, I don't know. Golden Girls is quite funny, actually. I will say that, but I haven't watched a lot of it. I definitely feel sometimes like I need to work on being a gay. It's I'm not succeeding well enough at certain things.
Well, I definitely prescribe the Golden Girls.
Yes.
So
what episode are we?
I mean, I'm old enough to know. I mean, I was a teenager when that came out, so I used to watch it all the time.
But there wasn't. Sorry to interrupt. There's an artist called Brian LaBelle who would be brilliant to have on the podcast, and he did a performance piece that was a durational performance piece that lasted, I think, a whole day. And he would sit on a bed for the whole day. He would talk to people individually, and then they would talk about a problem that they had, and then he would prescribe an episode of Sex in the City, and they would watch it together.
I think that I would adhere to that because I watched the whole series and then I watched it on repeat, and virtually every episode that came on during the repeats reflected something that was going on in my life, particularly in my love life. And I just thought it was so good. And I know someone who's not very good at flirting.
Okay.
And they openly admit that. And I was like, you need to watch Sex and the City. Because I think although it has dated, but I think it teaches you so much. I mean, basically, those 4 characters could be 4 gay men, really. Couldn't they?
Did you get someone to eat sushi off your naked body?
It wasn't sushi. But yeah, I kind of love them. But I did. Well, we did a feature on this when I went to New York and I did the Sex and the City tour. So I'd love to do a Golden Girls tour as well. I think maybe I should go to Florida. Okay, so the final Queens of Agony. It's a short one. Dear old Queens and Nate, what's a gay guy struggle that is almost impossible to explain to straight men? I mean, there's kind of a lot.
I can't actually think of anything, but yeah, what did you think?
I was thinking something about Drag Race probably would be something that straight men don't have to worry about.
They don't have to watch it.
Well, that's part of it. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. There won't be another season for something of like.
They don't have to watch Sex and the City or The Golden Girls. Isn't there something about coming out as well?
Yeah, no, I think
because it doesn't just end when you come out. It's like almost in every new situation that you're in.
Yeah, you're constantly coming out.
You kind of have to come out or like drop a few hints as to your sexuality, because straight men will very often talk to you about straight things, and you're like, I'm not into that.
I think coming out is a constant process, and it's a constant process that you kind of, as you get older, you kind of forget that you have to do as much. So obviously if you're out at work and you're out in your friendship group and you're out in your family, or you're kind of, whoever it might be, there's bigger portions of your life that know. But then, you go on holiday and you're like, oh, are you sure you want a double room? And it's like, yeah, of course I do, with my husband. Like, what, like odd things like that. It's kind of, you constantly have to remind people that you exist in the way that you exist. And then it's like, there's that moment of fear that constantly comes out of like, am I going to get rejected? Is this going to go badly? And even though it's probably not, it's still something that you have to encounter on a maybe daily basis for a lot of people.
Yeah. Tommy, what do you think you do regularly that a straight man doesn't have to do?
I can't really think of myself, but I was thinking about the idea of inherited trauma, and that's probably something that is only just beginning to be explored in terms of like how trauma can be passed down from queer communities, specifically, and how men living in the 1950s, who I feel a kinship with or a relationship with, and how they lived in the shadows and hiding their lives, and how that affects me living today. And also, being our age, we grew up when it was still illegal up until the ages of 21. And also growing up with that stigma of HIV, just being, in the 90s. Yeah. It was terrifying to be 17 and, coming of age and knowing that people perceive who you are with that disease.
Yeah.
I think the fact, in some ways, thinking about that, I always think about the fact that generation that we lost, how many of our queer elders have we lost that we can't look up to and have seen in society, and that thing of kind of like when people weren't coming out and it was all in the shadows, and then basically you've got a generation that's just gone. And so for my generation, which is only just a little bit younger than yours, I'm not going to be in my 40s, that I know about the AIDS tombstone and all of that kind of stuff that we experienced and kind of stuff like that, but I don't have anyone above. There's just a missing little bit of my kind of history of what it means to be queer, because I don't have those people that I looked up to as I was growing up to kind of go to see in the media, to see kind of like now that people have. And I think that's amazing, and that's something that like straight men never have experienced, is a loss of their representation in society. They've never had to experience a point in their lives that they weren't seen.
Yeah. Well, you should maybe listen to this podcast a little bit more. That was meant to be the light-hearted question. It turned out to be quite serious.
Maybe you could flip them so that we've finished with the drag race.
Nate, thank you so much. It's been so interesting to talk to you, and thank you for coming in. What would you like to say to our lovely audience as one last thing to put in their mind as we leave you?
I think just about normalisation of sexual health. So sexual health, mental health, physical health are all part of who we are, and kind of it's okay to kind of not know stuff. It's okay to ask questions. As they always say, there's no bad question or no wrong question, but it's normal to want to have sex. It's normal to need sexual health needs because of that, and actually just getting tested regularly is part of you looking after your life and looking after the life of your friends and partners and sexual contacts.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we deal with these subjects on our podcast, because I think the more we normalise it and the more people talk about it, the less of a stigma there is, the less fear there is around it. I also was going to talk at some point about slut shaming, because some people have been slut shamed for saying they're on PrEP on certain apps and things like that. And actually, it's just like, there's no place for that in our culture, I don't think, because people have different types of sexual behaviours.
Yeah.
And some
So
have
being-
multiple partners and some don't.
Yeah, but you're being proactive about looking after your sexual health. You shouldn't be shamed for kind of taking precautions and taking considerations. If you're choosing to have unprotected or condomless sex, you should be on PrEP. Like, it doesn't equate you looking after your health as something that's negative. But I think people assume that if you're having more partners that there's something sexually wrong with you. It's a very odd dynamic, but I think it's actually a lot about shame, and it's a lot about, again, the patriarchy and about how we view what it means to be sexually liberated and kind of actually having the lives that you want to live. And actually, realistically, people are quite jealous, I think, sometimes of people going out and doing what they want to do.
Indeed. Well, Nate, thank you so much. Please say goodbye to our lovely audience.
Goodbye, lovely audience.
Tommy, thank you. It's great to be back in the throne room.
Liar, beauty queen, fraud.
I do wish you'd stop calling me that. Where's that from again?
Married at First Sight.
Married at First Sight, okay. So now I need to watch that. Tommy, say goodbye to our lovely audience.
Goodbye, lovely audience.
Goodbye, lovely audience. We will see you next time on What That Old Queen.
You have been listening to What That Old Queen, written and presented by Tom Marshman and Bernie Hodges. The show was produced by Bernie Hodges for Hodge Podcasting in 2022. If you have a question for the old queens, or you'd like to be a guest, or you want to sponsor a show and give us lots of money, you can email hello@thatoldqueen.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter.